Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Nandana Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Nandana Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Vishnupada Pramsa Parijakacharya Shodasada Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Math Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Swami Vishnupada Pramsa Parijakacharya Shodasada Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Kartharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 7, titled Indra Offends Brihaspati, text number 15. Atatam Maracharyam Agada Dishanam Dvijam Prasadayishe Nishata Shirshna Tachcharanam Sprashan Atatamamaracharyam Agada Dishanam Dvijam Parasadishe Nishata Shirshna Tachcharanam Sprashan Atatamamaracharyam Agadadushanam Dvijam Parasadayushe Nishtam Shirshna Tachcharanam Sprashan. Ata, therefore, Aham, I, Amara Acharyam, spiritual master of the demigods, Agadadishanam, whose spiritual knowledge is deep, Dvijam, the perfect Brahmana, Prasadishe, I shall please, Nishta, Nishata, without duplicity, Shirshna, with my head, Touch Charanam, his lotus feet, Sparshan, touching. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Indra said, therefore, with great frankness and without duplicity, I shall now bow my head at the lotus feet of Brihaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods. Because he is in the mode of goodness, he is fully aware of all knowledge, and is the best of the Brahmanas. Now I shall touch his lotus feet and offer my obeisances unto him, try to satisfy him. Purport. Coming to his senses, King Indra realized that he was not a very sincere disciple of his spiritual master, Brihaspati. Therefore, he decided that henceforward, he would be nishata, non-duplicitous. Nishata Krishna touch charanam sparshan. He decided to touch his head to the feet of his spiritual master. From this example, we should learn this principle enunciated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is benedicted by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. A disciple should never be a hypocrite or be unfaithful to his spiritual master. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the spiritual master is also called Acharya. Acharyam mam vijaniyam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead says that one should respect the spiritual master, accepting him Lord himself. Navamanyeta karchit. One should not disrespect the Acharya at any time. Namartya buddhyushita. One should never think the Acharya an ordinary person. Familiarity sometimes breeds contempt, but one should be very careful in one's dealings with the Acharya. Agadadishanam dvijam. The Acharya is a perfect Brahmana and has unlimited intelligence in guiding the activities of his disciple. Therefore, Krishna advises in Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. One should fully surrender unto the spiritual master, and with service, sevaya, one should approach him for further spiritual enlightenment. Om Gana Charmandasya, Gananjana Shlakaya, Chakramachamana, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasarigo Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are hearing about Indra's repentance or his realization of his wrongdoing upon offending his spiritual master, Brihaspati. And the spiritual master, this idea or concept or practice of parampara, is central in the Vedic society or the Vedic way of transmitting knowledge. Pretty much every practice in Vedic culture has this parampara system, whether it's spiritual knowledge, as we read about in the Bhagavatam, and as we enter into in the Gaudiya Vaishnava parampara, but also, all of the individual Vedas, all of the Vedangas, there's Kalpa, the ritual aspects, Yotish, astrology, even, music or Ayurveda or all of those subjects, all are taught in the method of parampara, where knowledge is passed down from teacher to disciple. And even nowadays, practically speaking, the way of knowing things, I'm going to say the epistemological process, is still Shabda Praman. There are, of course, three epistemological processes that are discussed in the Vedic worldview or in our discussions concerning it. There are actually a lot, but Jiva Goswami reduces them to being in three broad categories, uh, which is pratyaksha, which is sense perception, anuman, which is logical deduction, and shabda, which is hearing from authorities. These days, the first two processes are very much lauded, especially by those who are of a more scientific or so-called scientific uh, mentality. The general attitude is, we can figure out uh, everything for ourselves. Just by looking at the world, either directly or through our instruments and logical deduction, we can learn all that there is to know. And we don't need to rely on hearing from authorities. This is, of course, nonsense, starting with the language. Sometimes, especially among very, one could say atheistic preachers, where they take the form of that directly, or they take the form of science educators, uh, or science popularizers, might be a better term. They say, oh, now we know this and we know that. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson, for some reason, comes up a lot in my YouTube recommendations. Sometimes in a video he says, oh, religion was, for a time when we didn't know about, the weather and electricity, how electricity worked and all that. So we made up gods. But now that, we know about the water cycle and electrons and everything, we don't need that. The issue is, of course, that we don't know anything. I know something, you know something, but there is no uh, really hive mind that we know everything. So we must still depend on uh, revelation, one could say, or transmission from one person to another, which is, of course, the entire process of education. That one hears from the teacher and tries to assimilate that knowledge. Even, in the sciences itself, the main way that knowledge is disseminated among the populace, or the scientific populace, is through journal articles. So one submits one's work, one writes up an article saying we did these experiments or calculations or whatever, and submits it to a journal, and then they go through the entire peer review process. And then it gets published if it's accepted. Uh, but that is also Shabda Praman. It's hearing from authorities. It's not that, when I read a journal article or a preprint or something like that, I go out, uh, or that it's not like I'm sitting next to the person performing the experiment with them and seeing the results. They saw the results, they applied theory to it, and then came to a conclusion and are now communicating that with me. I have to decide whether I trust them enough to do so or not. And theoretically, that's the whole idea behind peer-reviewed journals, is that it'll make the articles trustworthy enough to be relied upon, which of course doesn't always happen. And once you get the whole economics and sociology of the scientific community into it, things can get very weird when it comes to how much we should actually trust journal articles. But even outside the mm, specific view of science, in society in general, we also rely uh, on Shabda Praman in regards to our action. We rely on gurus. Even people who think, uh, oh, I'm a free thinker, I'm not bound by uh, any, sort of authority or uh, doctrine or anything like that. They are actually, most of the time, following some uh, philosopher or speaker or something like that, whether they realize it or not. Many times, the assumptions that they got from these thinkers are so inbuilt they don't even recognize them. Uh, and the way that they act, their lives are built more or less entirely on the thoughts of these philosophers. Many times today, it is the thought of some French postmodernist whose activities were so abominable that they shouldn't be even repeated, uh, but still somehow have so much influence uh, that people who think in this way find it difficult to even consider uh, another way of life or another way of thinking. And this is, in some sense, the way it is with all philosophies, in that if one is very deep into them, if one has very much accepted the uh, worldview of such a philosopher, it can be difficult to see uh, any other way out or any other way of thinking, I should say. And part of this is also due to the modes of nature. The modes of nature condition us to act and to think in certain ways, whether for good or ill. If one is in the mode of goodness, one will be able to appreciate spiritual knowledge. And if one is in the modes of passion or ignorance, which is where most of the philosophers that these people are following, that I should say many people follow, because many of us, at least speaking for myself, are coming from that background also. It might not have completely purged the thinking of these materialistic philosophers. But in any case, to the extent we are in the modes of passion and ignorance, we are bewildered. Of course, one is also bewildered by the mode of goodness. One is conditioned by it as well. Uh, but it is considered the, uh, if one is going to be conditioned at all, it might as well be the mode of goodness. So if we are always following, if we have to follow, both in our thought, in our action, and our worldview, the question becomes who to follow. Who should we listen to? And uh, it ultimately comes down to the character, the activities, and the teachings of whatever guru we are trying to follow or we are considering. What sort of person are we uh, considering to follow or not? I already mentioned uh, or alluded to the activities of some of the philosophers which lend their thoughts to a lot of the societal philosophies today. Um, Also, the activities of the uh, many other thought leaders uh, today and previously leave much to be desired as far as mm, I want to say proper action could go. Example that comes to mind is Albert Einstein. Of course, a giant in the field of physics. Even today, many people quote Einstein as, the prototypical smart person. Uh, is sometimes in debates between uh, religionists and atheists, they say, "Oh, Einstein believed in God," and then the atheist might say, "Oh, no, he didn't. He was more of a like pantheist or deist or something like that." And then they say, "No, no, no, he believed this." Uh, as if he was because he was able to maybe figure out uh, the way that space works. Uh, he is an authority on all sorts of matters because he is such a smart person. But if one looks at his private life, his actual activities, um, then they aren't actually very high class. He basically cheated on every woman he had a relationship with. Uh, and he, in certain cases, denied credit to people who actually helped him in um, performing his uh, scientific work. Uh, his relationship with his children was also not very good. Um, so simply by his intellectual prowess, he is held up as an authority, but is uh, if one looks at his personal life, one might think, maybe I do not want to follow this person. Maybe this person is not such a good person to get your ideas about how to live a good life from. One might wish to follow his scientific advice. If one is doing cosmology, for example, one might follow the Einstein field equations, but maybe leave him out of the discussion on if there's a God or not. Likewise, so many other um, leaders in philosophy, science, economics, sociology, everything give so many prescriptions about how they think that a person should live. But one should look at their actual life. A spiritual master, his greatest qualification is that he is a disciple of his spiritual master and is living in accordance with the teachings that he learned from his guru, um, who's living in accordance with the teaching that he learned from his guru and all the way back to Krishna. So one should accept such a spiritual master who is in the mode of goodness and is preaching in line with the conclusions of Shastra and the previous acharyas. And this is the basis of actual Vaishnav epistemology, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And one should, as much as possible, uh, adopt a worldview based on these uh, foundations. I sometimes refer to it just when I'm thinking about it, or if I'm talking about it to somebody, as a Prabhupada-based worldview. And that's one basis, as much as one can at one's level of advancement, uh, one's actions, views on things, etc., uh, on the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. Because we have accepted a spiritual master in the line from Prabhupada, if we are not directly Prabhupada's disciples. So we should be, as the purport recommends, non-duplicitous in our acceptance of this. In that if we have accepted Srila Prabhupada as a representative of Krishna, we should try to follow what he says. Of course, Maya is very powerful, and we might fall short of the standard, but we should at least strive to follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. And if we can't even do that, at least accept that they are the right thing to do, which is sort of the minimum that, yes, I might not be able to follow at the moment due to my very fallen nature, but that is what I am aiming for. And accept that Srila Prabhupada is the representative of Krishna, and that one should not think that the acharya is an ordinary person. Sometimes you hear this argument that, oh, when it comes to spiritual matters, of course we accept whatever Prabhupada says. But when it comes to what whoever is saying this views as material matters, social conventions, social roles, uh, things like that, then, oh, Prabhupada is, well, one has to recognize that he was Indian and he grew up in that time and, it's the early 1900s. But this is not the way to accept the spiritual master. not that he is just some product of a particular time and place. The spiritual master, while he might, one could say, incarnate in a specific time and place and preach according to that time for the people living there, we should not accept that he is bound or influenced to preach in that way just because he is the product of that time period. Because if one does, one uh, actually thinks that the acharya is not an acharya. So one says that the spiritual master is just preaching in this way, is just saying these uh, so-called material teachings about the way that one should act, or social roles, or things like that. Because he was born in a particular time and place, that is non different than saying that the spiritual master is a conditioned soul, which of course destroys the entire process of parampara. Because the idea is that one accepts an unconditioned spiritual master uh, to learn about Krishna, who learned from his unconditioned spiritual master, and so on. Because the example is given that a drowning man cannot save another drowning man. One has to be uh, not drowning. One has to be either on land or on a boat or something, to stretch the metaphor, in order to actually save somebody who is drowning. So one should view the spiritual master like this, that he is beyond the defects of material nature, of conditioned life. That he is beyond the defects of conditioned life, and that he should be, that if one accepts a person as their spiritual master, then they should be accepted as actually the representative of Krishna. And that if one pleases the spiritual master, then it is non different than pleasing Krishna. As is pointed out in the purport, Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado. So, yes, we should listen to the spiritual master and read Srila Prabhupada's books in this manner of trying to adopt a Prabhupada-based worldview and not filter the words of Srila Prabhupada through whatever worldviews or ideas that we came into the movement with, but to in fact do the opposite and filter our own worldview and ideas against the standard of Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So I'll stop here. Any comments, questions, additions, subtractions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Thakur Prabhu.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for a nice and stimulating class.
Thank you.
I appreciating your suggestion that we try to understand Srila Prabhupada's worldview and filter our own understanding through that. That is the that is the process. And of course, um, in the beginning of one's endeavor for Krishna consciousness, we sometimes have the tendency to do the opposite,
Mhm.
and that of course is not what is suggested by our acharyas. Um, Let me see. I had something in particular in mind here. Let me see if I can find this. Um, there are some nice purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita,
Mhm.
the Madhya Lila, in which Srila Prabhupada discusses this. He talks about interpretation, among other things. The
Mhm.
discussion begins with the different types of praman, and Jiva Goswami mentions that there are 10 different kinds of evidence um, that are all generally accepted as evidence, but that what does Srila Prabhupada say that the person presenting a hypothesis or reading the Vedic version, perceiving or interpreting by his experience, is certain to be imperfect in four ways. Right?
Mhm.
We all know the four types of defects. The tendency to commit mistakes, to become illusioned, tendency to cheat, and having imperfect senses. So um, um, and this what is discussed here as a pretense to the discussion of interpretation. That if one has these defects, then therefore his interpretations are going to be useless.
Mhm.
Um, so and there are some specific statements. Srila Prabhupada says that therefore Srila Jiva Goswami has warned us not to depend on any kind of interpretation. It is better to take the verses as they are without interpretation, because Srila Prabhupada explains that um, the the um, the actual meaning of the Vedic text is self-evident. There is no need for interpretation. Um, and Lord Chaitanya says in, what is it, verse 137 of Madhya 6, the Vedic statements are self-evident. Whatever is stated there must be accepted. If we interpret according to our own imagination, the authority of the Vedas is immediately lost. Um, Powerful statement that
Mhm.
there is virtually no room for interpretation. We have to just simply accept uh, the statements as they are. Um, Anyway, there's those verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita are interesting to review. This where does it begin? I guess Madhya 6 135, if anyone is interested. Apart from that, I was uh, reminded by your mention of Einstein,
Mhm.
interesting personality. Einstein, Einstein we don't know his actual IQ because it was never formally tested. Um,
Mhm.
but it has been estimated to be between 160 and 180. Um, and that's based upon his contributions to science and his intellectual achievements. Um, there is an American individual, and really remarkable because I don't know, he just doesn't fit most people's conception of an unusually bright person. But there's this guy named Chris Langan. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's supposed to be the smartest person in the world. He
Mhm.
has um, he has an IQ which is supposed to be considerably higher than that of Einstein. His IQ is between 195 and 210, if you can imagine such a thing. Incredible. Brilliant guy, but he has chosen to he's living on a farm in Missouri, and that's what he wants to do. He's unfortunately, I think he's raising cattle. He's not a dairy farmer, so it's not a very good thing. But he chooses to live a relatively simple life of physical labor. He once worked as a bouncer in a bar on Long Island. He was a forest ranger for a period of time. He has a colorful history. Interesting fellow. I met his own worldview. He wrote his ideas about the nature of the universe and so on. But he asserts that the most important thing in life is the pursuit of truth, or God, which he thinks is synonymous, that God and the truth are essentially the same. And he is clearly a theist. He believes in the existence of God. He thinks it's very important to establish a personal relationship with God because that's an option. You have that opportunity, and you should take advantage of it. He has some interesting things to say about the nature of the what he sometimes refers to as the absolute truth. Interesting fellow. So some people will assert that only ignorant people or those who are less educated will be zealous about religious practice and a belief in God. But here is the arguably the brightest fellow on the planet at the present time, and he is staunchly theistic. He's an interesting fellow. There's a number of YouTube videos about him and some interviews with him. Langan is his last name. That is Langan. Chris Langan, Christopher Michael Langan. Interesting fellow. If anyone's curious about him, you can look him up. Anyway, that's some of my thoughts. All right, Krishna Prabhu, thanks again.
Thank you. Agari Krishna, you have your virtual hand raised.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Prabhu, for a very insightful class on epistemology and how we can leverage it as a facility for spiritual advancement and getting closer to Krishna. So my question relates to selectively using the Shastras and selectively taking knowledge from different teachers. So you're saying it's like, okay, for example, Einstein, he's expert in materialistic science, but his behavior, basically, we should take it from his behavior that he can't talk anything beyond that, particularly about ontology and other metaphysical subject matters in philosophy. So would you say that approach, is it the same pitfall that one has when you have some kind of bias and then you just quote and memorize the shlokas that confirm your bias? So for example, with the contentious issue of illicit sex, is that you can come up with you can quote from different Dharma Shastras to indicate, and also Prabhupada as well, to demonstrate that while ISKCON and being a Prabhupada Nuga is the standard is to go back to Godhead, and therefore we only use sex only for the purpose of procreation. But there's other lower tiers, and those are seemingly justified. So that's just one example. But that's basically my question: is that this selective bias is, yeah, can we get into the same trouble? Because we're using it favorably for materialistic scientists, but in spiritual life, we're using it in another way as well.
Yeah.
It can be misused.
Because, in my view at least, the selective quoting process is actually evidence that you're bringing in some other philosophy into Krishna consciousness. Because you're only quoting those which are conforming to your pre-existing philosophy, in the sense that if you, for the example that you gave about the standards in regards to illicit sex, if one has the worldview previously that one is that illicit sex is okay or not that big of a deal, then one will try to fit Shastra to that worldview. While, like, what the actual approach should be is, okay, let's look at what Srila Prabhupada said on this matter and apply the correct hermeneutical principles, and then come to a conclusion, which, of course, in this matter will be, no illicit sex. But in any case, it depends on what we are taking as the basis of our worldview. What I'm suggesting and what I think Prabhupada wanted was that, we should study his words on any particular matter, and then come to a conclusion based on those. And then whenever we encounter other ideas, we apply the principle of yukta vairagya, that we accept, if an idea from another philosophy or worldview or something is not contradictory to the principles of devotional service, and is helpful in our Krishna consciousness, then yeah, we can apply it. But we reject those that are hurtful to our devotional service. So we accept, Einstein's scientific achievements. They help us in, making technology and things like that. For example, maybe space travel one day, depending on your views on that. But we reject his views of the ultimate reality and the ultimate goal of human life, because they are contradictory to the words of Srila Prabhupada. So we should also avoid selectively quoting or selectively selecting the statements of Shastra to conform to our previously held worldviews. Because we can, that is also a form of elevating other philosophers over Srila Prabhupada, if we are saying we're only going to accept Srila Prabhupada when he conforms with what we think already. So hopefully that is helpful. And I think Tarka also has some comments on this.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating your statement that about selectively accepting statements. It's a disease, serious disease that has to be uprooted. The tendency to quote selectively in order to arrive at the truth, um, you simply can't do that. You're going to have something that is going to be biased one way or another way. That's not going to be the truth. But the difficulty is that Srila Prabhupada said so many things that if you want to, or if you're not careful and you don't understand his statements are taken outside of their complete context.
Yeah.
And the complete context is everything that he said, all of his purports, all of his lectures, all of his letters. That's the complete context. Without understanding the complete context, it's possible you can actually support any idea you want with Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada's words, because he said so many things
Yeah.
in so many different ways in different times and places. You can find a statement somewhere that will support any idea you want, but it will be out of context. So you have to understand the full context. It means you have to do a lot of work. You have to do a
Yes.
lot of study. It's a lifetime of dedicated study to be able to understand Srila Prabhupada accurately, because there's just so much that he's given. And the same is true for our other acharyas and the Vedic literature. Srila Prabhupada has wonderfully precipitated the words of the previous acharyas and Shastra, so that by his words alone we can derive the highest truth. But we have to, as I say, you got to do a lot of reading. Or it's not hard to arrive at the wrong conclusion. I've seen it a
Yes.
million times. It happens all the time. The devotees make mistakes because unwittingly they're quoting out of the full context. So very important principles to understand. I thank you for bringing that up. There's something
Yeah.
else I
Thank you.
wanted to say, but can't remember what it was. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I will also just add that this out of context, or this idea of context, is especially uh, clear, or especially there, um, when people quote from Prabhupada's letters and lectures. Of course, the books are in some sense, uh, complete in themselves. But, of course, for many of the letters, we don't even necessarily have what Prabhupada was responding to. As in, we don't, the letters that were sent to Prabhupada that he's responding to aren't, at least in my knowledge, in evidence. Like they haven't been preserved. So the context in those is sometimes very unclear. Uh, so yeah, just wanted to appreciate what you were saying, and that one has to look at the full context. And I find that especially when people quote from outside the books, that sometimes the context can be very unclear in how to apply what we are reading. So the conch shell has just blown. So I guess we will end here. Sorry for if there are any last minute comments that haven't been said. But Srimad Bhagavatam ki